Aloha everybody, this is Kai, and welcome back to another episode of Kai's Creatures. So I've been thinking about doing this video for a while, but recent commentary had made me think it's probably time to go ahead and do it. But I wanted to make a list of pet bugs that are excellent to keep for people who are either just lazy, really busy, or have ADHD. Mind you, I'm not saying people with ADHD are lazy. It's just that all three of those things tend to culminate in the habit of not doing things. So it was a little difficult to rank a lot of these things because in many cases the care is exactly the same or very similar, and if it's not, it's just as easy as the other thing. So I enlisted a lot of background factors such as price, how easily you can acquire them, etc. And I will go ahead and mention those along with the ranking. So without further ado, here are 7 pet bugs that are great for people who are not great at staying on top of things. Now, the bottom spot on the list was kind of a competition between two things, but I went to find my example of one of those things, and it was dead for the exact reason that it made it on the bottom of this list. Sadly, that is a personal favorite of mine, Millipedes. Now, keeping Millipedes is a bit enigmatic because the best thing about Millipedes is how easy they are to keep alive. But the worst thing about Millipedes is how easy they are to kill. So the thing with Millipedes is all you really need is a container of a good flake soil, like rotted hardwood, stuff like that. Maybe occasionally a treat of an apple or a potato or something like that. Carrot's good. And then just pour a cup of water in there once every few days. Now, as much as that might seem to be a hands-off person's dream, there is a problem with millipedes, and that is desiccation, which means they dry out really fast. If you're the kind of person that can't keep a houseplant alive, don't keep millipedes. Now, the other reason that millipedes made it lower on the list than the next thing up is because of their handleability. Now, millipedes are very handleable. Kinda. See, the problem with millipedes is they hide constantly. Like, with the exception of a few species like ivories, for example, you'll almost never see a millipede. Like, you have a box of pet dirt, is what you have. You can handle them, but digging them out of that dirt is not recommended because there is a chance they are molting if they are hiding, and if you disturb them while molting, you could very well kill them. Another issue with handling millipedes is that they can excrete caustic substances from their body. Some even actually produce hydrogen cyanide, which is not a terrible thing for the most part, because you just wash your hands with soap and water and it's literally fine. But some people do actually have allergic reactions to the substances that millipedes produced when disturbed. Now, if you're gentle with them, they probably won't, but some species are more likely to do this than others. Now, I don't want to make it sound like millipedes are not handleable, because they absolutely are. It's just that if you go digging around for them and they're a molt, you might kill them. And, some people are allergic to the substances that they produced when disturbed. So, all in all, that means they're not as absolutely handleable as the next thing on this list. Now, number 6 on this list actually is very similar to keeping millipedes in many ways, but they beat out millipedes in a couple of different ways. So, number 6 on this list is Isopods. Isopods are the family of crustaceans that the much-beloved pillbug comes from, like you see here. Also known as the roly-poly, and several other names, I believe. They are simultaneously more and yet less handleable than millipedes. While they do not produce any, toxic substances, and you won't kill them if you disturb them, and they are actually out and about much more often than millipedes are, at the same time, they are very small, very quick, and while not particularly delicate, they are definitely a little more fragile than a big old millipede. So my favorite thing about isopods over millipedes is that while isopods are very moisture dependent, they are not quite so much as millipedes are, At least in my experience, I found that isopods can go through a little bit of a dry spell and come out okay, as long as it doesn't last too long. A day or two of dry soil usually won't kill them. And the thing about isopods is that it's much easier to get a colony going. Millipedes are not terribly expensive. You can get them for as low as $5 sometimes, depending on the species, but usually you're looking in the 10 to 20 range for most of the millipedes you can find in the market as pets. The problem is that's $10 to $20 each. If you pay $10 to $20 for isopods, you're paying $10 to $20 for a colony of them. So even if you do have a bit of a dry spell, a few of them are going to die off, but you're unlikely to lose them all unless that dry spell just continues for several days. So they need moisture just like millipedes, but not quite so desperately that they can't handle a dry day or two. Now, number 5 on this list is probably the most classic of pet bugs, and that is big beetles. So I'm not talking about any particular genus, family, whatever. I'm talking about the classic pet beetles. Your stag beetles, your rhino beetles, and flower beetles. Now, why am I lumping all these together like they're the same thing? Well, because care for them is essentially the same. This derby flower beetle, for example, all he really has in his enclosure is some fresh dirt that's not toxic and holds moisture. I give him a beetle jelly about once a week, and the occasional treat of fresh organic fruit, and he is pretty much good to go. All I really have to do is mist down the enclosure every now and again when I think of it. The same incredibly simple care requirements can be said for this rainbow stag beetle as well, or any other stag, rhino, or flower beetle, frankly. And as you can see, they are pretty darn handleable. Now, so much for the good things about beetles. Now, why is it that such big, awesome, beautiful creatures as beetles that are so delightfully easy to care for don't make it higher on the list? Well, that comes down to one factor, or a two-part one factor, and that is longevity and price. See, most beetles are not going to make it more than a few months after they reach adulthood. But adult beetles can be extremely expensive. Now, that can be mitigated somewhat by purchasing them in larval form. However, several months to several years of this is not the fun part of beetle keeping. And if you can see those mandibles on them, unlike adult stag beetles, which cannot bite that hard and generally won't with those mandibles, these guys absolutely will chomp on you with those monstrosities. And beetle grubs don't particularly like being handled, and they're not particularly a joy to handle anyway. As you can see, it's already coming at me. So this is an ox beetle, and this is actually a Japanese rhino beetle. But yeah, you're looking at 2 or 3 years of this before you get that adult beetle. So the only way to spend more than, 4 to 6 months with your pet beetle is to buy it in larval form. You also save quite a bit of money. A $200 beetle could be $20 of the larva. So you save a lot of money that way, but you go through a very long, boring larval phase and a very risky pupation. There's a chance that it might die before it ever reaches adulthood. Now, care for beetle grubs is very much like millipedes, even easier really because they are not quite so desperately water dependent as millipedes are. So yeah, big beetles like that are awesome and incredibly easy, but unfortunately they're expensive and short-lived. Now, number 4 on this list might surprise you because it's probably something nobody's ever thought about keeping. But coming at number 4, we have orthopterans. More specifically, grasshoppers. Now, why would grasshoppers make it so high on the list, or even on the list at all? Well, frankly, because much like beetles, they're incredibly easy to keep. In fact, the care for these guys is just about the same as beetles. Typically, beetle jellies, bug burgers, orange cubes, and your typical bug food that you can just throw in there and leave it there for a week is usually good enough for them. In the handleability department, they do lose a few points compared to beetles because unless you have a special one like this that has missing legs, they will jump off of you. I was lucky to find this one in the wild already missing his hopping legs, so really he's more of a grass walker. But yeah, please do not pull their legs off just to make them easier to handle. Like, I don't feel like that should have to be said, but you know, people take animal cruelty rather casually when it comes to insects, so I'm just throwing it out there. So here we are in the top 3. And taking the bronze medal are the desert tenebrionid beetles. Again, like the previous category of beetles, the reason I'm not picking one particular species is because there are just literally dozens, that the care for them is pretty much exactly the same. And in fact, many desert tenebrionid beetles actually can live communally, much like you would do in a fish tank. I am talking darkling beetles, I'm talking ironclad beetles, and of course, death-feigning beetles. Now, handleability does vary between species, between you totally can handle them, but they might not like it, to probably should not. These are death-feigning beetles. This is the smooth death-feigning beetle, and this is the famous blue death-feigning beetle. Now, I assure you they are perfectly fine. Ah, there, see? But yeah, so these guys, if you spook them, they might just roll over and pretend they are dead, hence the name. But death-feigning beetles and ironclad beetles in particular are very handleable. The only problem is they don't handle you very well. So unlike a stag or a rhino that will hold on to you, you have to be very careful to hold on to them. And preferably don't hold them high above a very hard surface, because you are likely to hurt them. Hey! There you are, guys. So what makes these so great is, like I said, they are communal. And again, a little bit of beetle jelly every week or so, and some dried fish flakes or some other source of protein, and these guys are good for quite a while. They are quite a bit more long-lived than stags and rhinos, etc., with the blue death-feigning beetle in particular being capable of living up to 8 years, as a matter of fact, which is forever for a beetle. I've even heard they can live up to 15, but that seems like a bit of a fish story. So while care for these guys, much like the other beetles like stags and rhinos, is delightfully simple, where these guys really whoop on them is with their price to longevity ratio. Most desert tenebrionid beetles are capable of living for a couple of years, and their price ranges from like $5 to $10 usually. The blue death-feigning beetle, the most beloved and sought after of the entire group, usually averages a whopping $12. Like, I've seen them for 10, I've seen them for 15, but on average I'd say about $12 per beetle is what you're gonna get for a blue death feigner. This guy, I think he was like $8. Coming in at number 2, the silver medal, is cockroaches. For example, this orange-head roach. They make wonderful pets. Unlike many of the other entries on this list, there is absolutely no flaw with handling roaches. Now, that's not to say the handleability doesn't vary, but as long as you get a species that doesn't fly, they're incredibly easy to handle. These orange-head roaches, for example, are a little on the quick and dirty side, but not terribly so, as you can see. Now, these make even better pets. These are Madagascar hissing cockroaches. This is the standard well-known hissing cockroach, which is Grumphodirina portentosa. And on the other side of my hand here, we have Elliptorana javanica, the Halloween hissing cockroach. Now, when it comes to easiness and availability as pets, these guys literally have it all. They are not particularly delicate. Like, you can handle them and they have no real problem with it. They hold on to you, as you can see, unlike the desert tenebrionid beetles, which will just fall off. They hold on to you, so you can handle them much more casual. They're extremely docile. They have no defense mechanisms whatsoever, so you can pretty much just pick them up and hold them like this. So care for these sweet little critters is very similar for what was listed previously. Like, it doesn't take much more than a box they can't escape from and food, which for these guys is pretty easy. They're cockroaches. But yeah, the incredible availability and cheap price of these guys, combined with the fact that you can buy a few and have dozens in the near future, they will eat just about anything, they're harmless and wonderfully handleable, makes these easily the silver medal. And in most people's minds, gold, but there's one more thing I want to mention that's particularly special and I feel criminally underrated. And it breaks my heart to have to say this, but at the moment, I do not have this insect. I did have them and I absolutely adored them. So in my mind, the gold medal goes to the Bess beetle. So where the other two beetles lost points in handleability, with the stags, rhinos, and flower beetles being, it's a little difficult to get them off sometimes, especially with the really strong beetles like the Hercules beetle, they will hold on to you and they will not let go. Now with the desert tenebrionid beetles, it's kind of the opposite, in which they don't hold on to you. You have to really cup them and baby them and make sure you're careful with them. You can handle them, there's no harm in it, but you can't do it casually. It's really a focused experience. And then we have the Bess beetle, which hangs on much more like the roaches do, except they are much slower than roaches are. They are much more heavily armored, so if you do drop them, they're not going to get hurt. They can't fly like most of the other large beetles can, and they are as tough to adversity as the desert beetles are, and they live for a couple years, so they're going to outlive most of the cool beetles. When it comes to care, there's only one pet I think in this world that is easier than the Bess beetle, and that is pet rock. If you thought feeding isopods or millipede or roaches was easy, they've got nothing on the Bess beetle. Bess beetles eat rotten hardwood. Literally, you put them in there with a kind of spongy log that's had some time to rot, and you're done. You never have to feed them again for the entire 2 years that they live. That's it, you're done. The price of these beetles is also pretty delightful because they're going to range from about $8 to $12, so really not much. Their handleability, low price, and ease of care is nothing to say of how fascinating they are as an animal. See, they are unique among insects in that they actually care for their young. And I'm not like eusocial insects like bees and ants do, but like they will pair up, have larvae, and take care of their larvae like in a little nuclear family, like mommy and daddy and babies. Like, that is utterly unique among insects. Another fun thing about Bess beetles is they can talk. They can make up to 17 different sounds. Most of these are just going to be little squeaks and whatnot, but they actually can make a wider variety of sounds than most mammals. So why does the Bess beetle win the gold medal in my opinion? Because they're very cheap, they're extremely hardy, they're unbelievably easy to feed, they're super docile, super handleable, they exhibit parental care, they can talk. I mean, you can't ask for a cooler bug. I mean, you can ask for a cooler bug, but you can't ask for one that is that easy to take care of. So that is my top 7 pet bugs for people who just can't be bothered. So thanks for tuning in, and remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Aloha and take care.